Hi everyone, and welcome to Creative Chelsea. Today I have for you a really fun video where I'm going to show you a simple card. Then we're going to step it up by adding some layers and accessories. And then we're going to make it a wow card by embossing the cardstock in the back and adding some die cut images. So today I'd like to share with you one of Stampin' Up's new stamp sets called Mountain Air, and this is a reversible stamp set. And what that means is you're going to have your detailed image, and then on the back you're going to have your solid image. So those come as one stamp. So let me show you. So here is that stamp. It has the detail on one side, and then you're going to use the back as a reversible image to create that solid shape. And then I also needed a greeting. And so I went to my Well Said stamp set, which is awesome. It has 51 stamps in it, and they're really great for any card. So I found on here the saying, "Time for a new adventure." And so I really loved how that worked with this stamp set. And so we're going to be using that on our cards today as well. So those are the only things that you need, plus your cardstock and inks, to create this simple card. And that's where we're going to start today. So for your simple card, you need a card base, and I'm using Sahara Sand. It has been cut to 5.5 inches by 8.5 and scored at 4 1/4. And then I've got a piece of Whisper White cardstock, and it is 1/4 of a sheet. So that is 4 1/4 by 5.5. And then I've got a 1/2 inch strip of Whisper White as well, and this is 4 inches by 1/2 inch. We're going to be using Night of Navy ink, Mossy Meadow, and Soft Suede. So let's go ahead and start with our Night of Navy. When stamping with these images, because we have a lot of flat image, so the back side of this is totally flat, I highly recommend stamping with a paper piercing mat, and that's going to give you the best image. So we're going to start with Night of Navy. We're going to start with this pine tree landscape stamp set, and you're going to need a scrap piece of paper. Place that over your paper piercing mat, and then get your white large cardstock. And we're going to be stamping on it horizontally, and then we'll be trimming it down. So we're going to be using the technique, I think it's called multiple generation stamping, and that's where instead of re-inking between every stamp, you're going to just continue to stamp on your paper, which gives you those different values and shades of color. So I like to start with this one, and we're just going to kind of place it in the middle of our cardstock. So you can either stamp it like this or flip your stamp pad over and stamp on your stamp like this. Because it's such a large image, I want to make sure I get a nice good coverage. And then, like I said, stamp in the middle. And this one we're actually only stamping once because it's the only area that we want that nice dark Night of Navy color. So you're going to need your Simply Chamois to clean your images. So go ahead and clean that off. And then you're going to remove your image and flip it over. Okay. So this is important that you get a good coverage on this. Okay, so we don't want to use this first generation. Okay, so that would be, so we need to stamp off our image, off our cardstock, and then you're just going to, so it's not going to match perfectly, but you are just going to take, and this is the second generation, you're going to stamp on your cardstock over your image, and you can see how that gives us a lighter color. And then you're going to continue to stamp down. I'm actually going to flip my image so that I kind of have a reverse, and I'm stamping again without inking. So that's a third generation, and you can see I kind of missed adding some pressure there. And then we're going to flip it, and you can do this however you want. I'm just going to come down here and do the very bottom. So there's another generation, and then I'm just going to try to fill in those spaces as well. Okay. So we've got some different textures and some different colors. Looks like I had some water drip there from my Simply Chamois. So the reason we're doing, we're kind of bringing it down is so we can kind of cut off some of those mistakes. I can also cover this drip with with my greeting as well. Okay, I'm just going to add another little stamp right there to try to add some color to that space there. Okay, so you're going to want to clean this. Let's just move that off to the side. So you can notice my fingers are starting to color. So this is a pretty messy stamp set. I noticed while I was creating these cards that I was getting ink everywhere, all over myself. So, and that might have also been because I was using some pretty dark colors. So just be prepared for that and make sure that you kind of try to keep your fingers as clean as possible so you don't transfer your fingerprints to your cardstock. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and remove this stamp, and we're going to grab the mountain stamp. All right, so I've got the textured side first, and we're going to stamp the mountains in Mossy Meadow. So this is full strength. And I've got some ink that has been picked up by the block. So I'm just going to use a napkin, tissue, paper towel, whatever you've got nearby to clean that up. And then you want your mountains to just sit right on top of those pine trees. Okay, good pressure everywhere. And then we're going to go ahead and clean it. So we're not using the detailed area again. So once it's clean, go ahead and flip it over. And we're going to be using that solid area. So ink that up. And then go ahead and stamp off so we don't get that strong color. And then you're going to go ahead and stamp. Now this time I'm going to just stamp over my mountains, but you'll notice that there is some area between here that doesn't have any green. So we are going to come back and stamp in that space. So then just shift your mountains to one side and go ahead and stamp again without inking. And then shift to another side and stamp again. And then come on down and fill in that space. So you're just getting a very light green in that area. And you can keep stamping in any areas that feel like you need some green. So any white areas that are poking through. That is how you use the reversible stamps. To complete our simple card, we're going to trim down this paper to be a 4" by 4" square. Sorry about bumping the camera. So let's go ahead and just start by trimming it right about here. I think I can cover that up with my greeting, so I'm not too worried about that problem. I'm going to go ahead and measure this at 4 inches. And then I'm going to double check that it's 4 inches from top to bottom. And it is. So this piece originally, I thought it was 4 1/4, but it turns out to be 4, probably by 5 1/4. So we can go ahead and leave that as is. Grab our card base, which is Sahara Sand. Fold that in half on that scored line. Use my bone folder to flatten this crease. So I'm going to add my image, and I've got some snail. And you can see that the back has a lot of extra color too. It's just the way it is. So we're going to butt this all the way to the left. Place that down. I'm going to open it up so I don't smear it with my fingers. And then we do need to stamp our greeting. So I've got my paper piercing mat, and then I've got my scrap paper on top. We're going to use soft suede. Go ahead and ink that up and stamp it down a little bit to the right. Okay, then we're going to add this to our card with some snail. Place it over that little accident and all the way to the right of our card. Try to make sure it is level. All right, so we have finished our simple card. Let's go ahead and move on to our stepped up card that has a couple extra layers. Okay, before beginning our second card, I've cleaned off the chamois because it had a lot of ink from that card, and I have cleaned off my hands so that I'm not transferring a lot of those colors from the ink to this card as well. So we're just going to do the exact same thing with our stamping. So up here it's okay because we're actually going to be cutting out our mountain range. Okay, so for our stepped up card, we are also cutting this down, and we're cutting it down to 4 inches by 3 3/4. So 4 inches by 3 3/4. And so the 4 inches is just in the width, and then we are going to cut down some of the bottom here at 1/4 of an inch. So go ahead and grab, I'm going to kind of trim right here where that little extra piece is, where I don't want that. And then I'm going to flip it and do 4 inches. And then I'm going to take my pair of scissors, and I'm just going to trim along this mountain edge. Okay, and then I forgot to remove 1/4 of an inch from the bottom, so let's go ahead and do that as well. Okay. All right, so we have the same pieces of paper for our card. We've got a Sahara Sand card base, and we had our white, and then we are using a 1/2 inch strip for our greeting as well. So those are the same. The things that are different, we've got another piece of Sahara Sand, and this is 4 inches by 3 1/4. We're using a piece of Mossy Meadow, and this is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So then we're also using a piece of Native Navy, and it is 3 3/4 by 4 1/4. So all the dimensions for the cardstock, they should be listed in the description below. Let's stamp our greeting. So we're using the same greeting with the same ink. Okay, so we've got our card base. Go ahead and fold that. Going to add your Mossy Meadow down first, and this will just go at an angle. And I'm just tilting it to the right and just having it touch those edges. Then I'm going to add the Native Navy, and I'm adding it so it's tall. instead of wide. So one side is a 1/2 inch taller than the other. And so I'm adding it so that it's tall, kind of placing it in the center and tilting it to the left and all the way to the left. Now this one, I'm going to add our mountain range to the Sahara Sand Cardstock. So go ahead and place some snail on the back of that, and then just line up those edges. Turn it over so you don't get all the ink on your fingers. There we go. This gets added with some dimensionals. And you're just going to place those wherever you would like. I'm a corner and one in the middle type of person. Okay, and this goes all the way to the right of the card. And in the center, you kind of want to see a little bit of the Night of Navy cardstock on the top and on the bottom. That's some accessories. So this one has the braided burlap trim, and we're just going to add about 4 inches of that, which is the width of this piece. So just measure it and cut. And then you do need liquid adhesive to add this. I'm just going to open it up slightly to make it a little thicker and to give it a little bit of interest. So I've got my liquid adhesive, and I'm just going to add a line of that right here where the detailed image stops. Okay. And then get your greeting, and you're trimming this down so that you can see some of that ribbon on the sides. And I don't know why, but I can't trim straight. Like, I can't cut a straight line. Always angles slightly. Okay. And then you're adding that, and you'll need to add that with a little bit of liquid as well, liquid adhesive, just so that it can kind of get in those fibers and you don't have it lifting after you've completed the card. So just to the right, over that twine, or not twine, the braided trim. And then last, just to add a little bit of bling, we're adding some rhinestones. And I'm just going to take a large one and place it down here at the bottom, and then medium and a small. And I think this is the older configuration of rhinestones. So I don't think the new ones offer these strips here, but I know that you still get those 3 sizes. All right, so our stepped up card is done. And I really love how it was pretty simple still to create this card. Didn't need a lot of other products except for some accessories and some extra pieces of cardstock. All right, so let's go ahead and move to our wow card. So I have used some other products to create this wow card. So I'm just going to walk you through what I've used. In the background here, I've got the Pinewood Planks embossing folder, and this is just a really fun folder that creates kind of a wood grain on your paper. The other thing I've added are the matching dies to the stamp set, to the Mountain Air stamp set. And so I will show you which ones I've used and how to use those. So the other thing I've added is from the Nature Roots framelit dies, and it's just this leaf, 3-leaf image, and it's embossed, and I really like that. And I've added some extra color to it to bring out that texture, and I'll show you that. And then the last thing is this adventure, and the word adventure comes from the Sweet Silhouette dies, and this is a really fun one, and it's nice and large, so I wanted to use that as well since it goes along with our greeting. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to stamp this card, and we're actually going to stamp it a little differently than we did with our first one. We are going to stamp just the solid images and then we're going to stamp the detailed images on another paper and cut those out with the dies. So let's start with that. So I've got my scrap paper, my paper piercing mat, and let's start with the Mossy Meadow, since I already have that on my stamp block. And for this card, you're going to need 2 pieces of white paper. We're going to be stamping on both. So go ahead and ink up. We've got the flat side first this time. I'm going to ink that up. We're going to stamp off. And then we're going to stamp first on, we're going to create this shadow mountain area. And so that's just going to go in the middle. And then, like before, just continue to repeat those mountain ranges all over. Okay, so I've stamped it 3 times without re-inking. I did get a little extra ink down here at the bottom, probably because I didn't apply enough pressure my first time I stamped it off, but that's okay because we're going to cover that up. Now I'm going to clean, actually I'm not going to clean it. I'm going to get my second piece. I'm going to ink this again. And I've got ink everywhere, but I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to stamp it off, and then I'm just going to stamp it on near the top. All right, so let's go ahead and clean this. Make sure to clean the block as well if you have ink like I do all over. Okay, so now we're going to flip it, and we're going to get that detailed on that side. So ink up the detailed side. And you're going to stamp over your shadow, like so. Okay, so clean this, and we're going to switch it over to the other stamp now. So we're inking that with the Night of Navy again. All right, so go ahead and place that below your mountain range. And then clean off your image, flip it over, just like before, and then ink it up again. We're doing all the same kind of inking techniques, but we're just going to be doing some extra cutting for this card. So go ahead and stamp that off, and then stamp that on, and then rotate it. And you're going to get that mirrored look. Okay, so we've got our mountain range with 1 background. We've got our pine tree with 1 background and then a mirrored look. And then on this second page paper, we've got kind of a shadowy background with 3 stamping. Let's go ahead and stamp our greeting since we're kind of in stamping mode. So we've got that with soft suede again. And our stamp. Okay, so we're doing the same stamp, but this time we're going to be removing the word adventure. Okay, so all of our stamping is done. So let's go ahead and we're going to cut out things at the Big Shot. So we're going to start by using the dies that match the Mountain Air stamp set. So these are called the Majestic Mountain dies. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to line up our mountain range. And I'm going to grab some washi tape so I can line everything up and have it stay in place. So when you use any sort of tape, you want to make sure that you're only taping it to the outside of your image. Okay, so this mountain range has a couple white caps, and that's okay. So you're lining it up with your detailed image, not with your shadow image. So the tape goes on the outside, so that way you don't accidentally rip any of your image. And then this kind of wavy, interesting looking line actually is for the pine trees. So you're going to take this and you're lining it up with the pine trees. And again, use a little washi tape. And on the outside, just place that to keep things from moving around. We're going to cut this out at our big shot, and then we'll be cutting one more time, and I will show you that in a second. Okay, so we've cut that out. We've got our mountain range, and this piece has come off. So we're going to now cut the bottom of this river or whatever. And it is not going to be perfect either. So just kind of bring it down so that you get mostly cut water. Maybe something like that. Okay, so you can see that there are some areas that are going to be white. That's okay. We're just going to get kind of this really fun reflection. And then we're going to put the mountain range over our mountains here. So this is a little tricky. So kind of just bring it down. What you want is you want to make sure that the majority of your mountain range is green. And then we actually are not going to run this all the way through our big shot. So let me show you how I am putting them on my plate. So I've got my magnetic platform here, and then my well-loved cutting side. So this is the side I always use when I cut. And then this is my clear plate that goes on top. So instead of placing my clear plate like this, where it would cut out the whole image, I'm going to just place it right here. So it's only cutting the top, and we're leaving this bottom piece uncut. So I will not be cutting this edge here. So this is how I'm going to run it through my big shot. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've cut out my water pine tree reflection, and I've cut out my mountain range. So those are ready to put on my card. So this is going to kind of come and cover up a little bit of that mountain range, and then this will be on top of that, like so. Okay, but we're not putting it on the white. We're actually going to put it here on this piece. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this with my paper cutter because I'm going to use this white for the word adventure. And so you probably just need a little extra space just so everything lines up. So I'm cutting this so the tips is about 2 inches. So that's for my word adventure. Okay, so this is my Sahara Sand Cardstock, and it's 4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And I'm going to be working so that the 4 inches is going horizontal. So you're going to place down your mountain range first. And we're going to trim it off in a minute. So just kind of get an idea of where you want that mountain range to be. And then you're going to add your detailed mountain range on top. I'm going to kind of shift it just slightly so it's not exactly the same as the one above it. Then place down your water. And just make sure that you're covering up that bottom of that mountain range. I'm going to bring it over slightly. So I've got those 3 layers on my Sahara Sand cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and measure it at 4 inches and then trim off those sides. And then the same 4 inches and trim. Okay. So let's go ahead and assemble some of these elements. So we've got our card base, which is the same as before. And then we have the same size cardstocks. The only difference is we are adding and embossed the wood or the pine wood planks to this. And I want them to be running vertical. So I'm going to be placing my paper in like this, and I'm going to run this through my Big Shot. Okay, don't know if you can see that, but we've got this really nice wood texture on it now. So we can add this to our card, and you can do either side. We're adding it the same way. We're tilting it to the right. And then we're going to add our Night of Navy to the left. And then we're going to add this with some dimensionals, just like before. Okay, so this is going straight on that edge in the center. So before we cut this, I'm going to add some green with the stamping blends, which are the Stampin' Up alcohol markers, over the gold foil, and that's just going to give it a gold tint. So this is the Old Olive Dark, and you can just add it over that. You can kind of see how it adds some green color to that gold foil and some texture as well. So we're going to cut that out with the, so there are 2 of these pine tree dies. So we're going to cut that out with the pine tree die at the Big Shot, and then the word adventure on that extra piece that we cut off from our mountain range. So we're going to take these to the Big Shot and be right back. Okay, so we've got our word adventure cut out. And we'll add that to our card, and then we've got our pine tree. And it's just a very subtle extra green tint to that gold. And you'll just need to poke out those little extra pieces. Okay, so then the last thing we need to cut out so that we're ready to finish our card is this leaf. And this leaf comes from the Nature Roots dies. And so there are 2 parts to this leaf. There's the embossed part, which is right here. So this is embosses it. And then there's the cutting part, and this cuts it. So you're going to need to emboss first and then cut. And we're just doing it on a scrap piece of Mossy Meadow. So I'm going to run this through my Big Shot first, then I'm going to line it up and cut it, and I'll be back. Okay, so we've got that piece, and you can see that there's some texture there, but I want to make that more pronounced. So I've got my dark Old Olive and my light Old Olive, and I'm going to just add some dark Old Olive in these little veins of the leaf. Just follow the veins on all 3 leaves. And then come down a little bit on that stem. And then grab your light Old Olive, and you're just going to blend all those together. So it doesn't need to, you don't need to be super detailed with it. you're just pretty much going over the whole cardstock. And that looks really dark right now, but as it dries, you're going to notice that it just brings out those veins and that embossed look. Okay, so now we're ready to add our other details. We're going to start with the gold pine tree. We're going to add that with some dots of liquid adhesive. So you're just going to place these randomly in some of the larger areas of the pine tree. Okay, carefully flip that over, and you're just going to place this to the left, and I want the trunk to stay on my paper just so that it doesn't accidentally get pulled off. So just press that down gently. And next we're going to add a 4-inch strip of the braided burlap trim. Do that with our adhesive, and that's just going to go on that horizontal line like before. You can open that up if you'd like. Okay, next we're going to add our leaf, and that's just going to go right here. I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid adhesive again, just to kind of help it stick to that burlap trim. And I'm going to bring it down. Next, I'm going to trim down my time for a new. So we're going to cut out the adventure part. And I'm going to actually trim the top and bottom as well. So just give it a small little border. And then add that with a little bit of adhesive. I'm going to place that so it's just overlapping my leaf slightly. And then lastly, we're going to add the word adventure. And flip it over, add a couple spots of adhesive with your liquid glue, just kind of at the top and bottom so nothing catches and gets stuck or gets pulled off, I mean. And you're going to add this to your card. And I'm just going to place it, a little lower than my original one because I do have that space because my blue didn't quite come down as far as the other one did. So maybe just up a little bit so it's on that, like right there. So time for a new adventure. Okay. Lastly, we're going to color some of our rhinestones with, I've got the light old olive, and I'm going to do a large one, a medium one, and a small one. And I love these alcohol markers because they will tint your accessories. So I'm going to add this one down here under by my blue, on my blue cardstock. This one's going to come somewhere about there, and this one is going to come on my leaf right there. Okay, so there is our wow card. We've used a lot of other products to create a spectacular card for a new adventure. I hope you enjoyed learning this fun technique with me today and that you give it a try. Please subscribe, like, and share. Visit creativechelsea.com for a free tutorial of this project and to purchase the supplies needed. Have a creative day. Bye!